The views expressed in this episode do not represent the views and feelings of all the members of Not a Strong Start. One in particular loved the film so much they could not express their emotions on camera. You know who you are. Warning, spoilers ahead.
Welcome everyone to this bonus episode of Not a Strong Start. With The Flash coming out this weekend, of course, we were going to take time to talk about it. We're DC fans here. We are fans of the Flash. So you can tell. Got my Flash shirt here. George got his
Me too.
Flash memorabilia. Minnie's got the color scheme happening and the posters. So we had to get into it. First, what was everyone's thoughts going into this before watching the movie, especially with everything going on in the last few years? We'll start with you on this one, Minnie.
Going into it, from listening to all the test audience scores, I thought it was going to be absolutely amazing. I mean, with everything that Ezra Miller was going through, the canceling of Supergirl, the reviews, talking about canceling The Flash because of all the bad publicity and all of his drama, but them being hesitant because it was being received so well. I thought it was going to do amazing. I had high hopes going into it. I guess is where I'm going to end that.
What about you, George?
This movie's been in production hell for quite some time. It probably should have got canceled a long time ago just because of how many directors and writers they went through. And it was kind of going through like what happened to Ant-Man, before they found the right person for that. Even with Tom Cruise's and Spielberg's thumb of approval, I was skeptical. I was like, I don't know. Like usually when you hit this many speed bumps, it's kind of hard to recover and make a tangible film that can tell anything remotely worth entertaining. So I was keeping my expectations pretty low.
Initially, when they announced the project before all that stuff happening, I didn't have a good feeling about it. I was not looking forward to it, mainly because I was from the start not on board with Ezra as Flash. I didn't like him as Flash when he popped up. In the movies, I was just not a fan. I'm like, what is this mixture of like different characters into one that you're calling Barry? So I was never a fan from the start. I did get a little cautiously optimistic when I started seeing like Spielberg and Tom Cruise. I'm like, okay, maybe it isn't so bad. It was still a cautious optimism because of what DC EU has been until this point overall. Regardless of the quality of the movie, if it was horrible, if it was amazing, I felt the movie was still not going to perform very well, and it was still going to get a lot of hate, mainly from the Snyder Cult. With those initial expectations kind of out of the way, let's start with the bad here. We'll start with you, George. What was some of the things that this movie did not do well?
As someone who knows the source material, as we all do, it's kind of hard to separate it at times. Going from that angle, why are we watching Zod take over the world again? We've watched this scene so many times. This is the second or third time they've recapped him taking over the world. Just now, instead of Clark Kent, we're going with Kara Zor-El. And it just, for me, it kind of fell flat. I didn't need to see that all over again. In the original Flashpoint, whether you read the comic book or the animation, it's the superheroes kind of become villains in this new world. Wonder Woman and Atlantis, Aquaman are at war with each other. What a better story that is for Barry to deal with. Like, that's a heavy weight. Oh no, I've brought back my mother, but now my friends are at war with each other. I sacrificed a new family that I created for my blood family. Is this really worth it? I think that's a much better story to tell. And plus, this isn't Marvel. Marvel doesn't have the rights to everything. DC does. Why are you just throwing all your characters away for cameo blips? I just felt like that was just a waste of all of the IP that they have that could be using to its fullest potential. That was disappointing for me. There's a lot more, but I think that's a big chunk that I feel like that can be touched
upon. Well, let's dive into that. Let's discuss that point. I think on my end, I get what you're saying, and I agree. It is a way better storyline the way it was done within Flashpoint, especially with the war. I do think if that would have been the storyline that would have been going with, Flash might have been canceled. They might not have kept going through, and maybe when James Gunn took over, he might have made the decision finally to like put the axe to it with him choosing not to go forward with those characters, because he already took out their cameos because he didn't want to tease that we're going to get more from these characters. And that with Ezra, I think it would have increased the chances of this being axed. Just my opinion there. But it would have been a way better storyline.
Yeah. Well, just to add on to that, then you would have two problem actors, because Marrow was a very big part of the Flashpoint comic and animated movie.
Yeah.
So now you would have had Amber Heard with Ezra Miller and all of their dramas. So definitely would have been on the chopping block with two of them going through their legal issues at the same time.
Yeah. But I think you could have twisted it, instead of having that love interest aspect, maybe you just have Atlantis and the Themyscira at war with each other. The reason can be whatever. As long as they're at war with each other, that creates enough of a hurdle for Barry to deal with, where it's just like, oh no, my friends are at war. We don't have to have the scandal of adultery put in there.
They could have done what they did with Batman when he fell into that timeline. It was no longer Ben Affleck; it was Michael Keaton.
Yeah,
They could have
different
gotten
actors.
someone else from Mara, which would have, they wouldn't have to overly explain because we already saw that Keaton, that Batman's a new person.
Yeah.
With the whole Zod thing, I felt whatever the main problem was not the focus of this movie. The invasion was just kind of like a background thing to deal with the main problem, which is Barry's action, Barry himself being the villain in this, which Flashpoint Paradox, that's pretty much what the end thing is Barry being the villain of that story and kind of messing things up. So I think the Zod thing, that's probably why it didn't bug me too much. I would have preferred the other storyline, but I don't look at it as the central issue. It's just more of a background thing. It's just there to kind of give a threat to make him try to find everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I get the Zod aspect just from the lesson that they were trying to get with the fixed point in time. Like, for that world, Zod destroying it and not being stopped was a fixed point in time, and there was no fixing that, which led to the lesson that he was supposed to learn, basically about his mother. Like, that was a fixed point in time. They dropped the ball later, but like, I get why they were doing that, why they had him take over the world again, to have him realize you can't stop everything and some things need to happen.
One could say it was like a canon event.
That's what was going in my head the whole time. I turned over to Joe and I was like, it's a canon event. You did bring up, the whole Zod invasion and stuff. That kind of brings it into one of my bads in this. I was not a fan of the choice of location of the desolate battleground that they had there in the middle of like the mountains and the desert. It was just so plain, visually unappealing. I get why they're doing it. I feel DC or WB as a whole is traumatized from Man of Steel, because when they did have this in a city setting, so many people absolutely lost their shit. Like, how can so many, all the collateral damage, so many people dying, like blah, 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 even though that's just part of the world. There's collateral damage.
I remember even you yourself had mentioned it when we first watched Man of Steel. You're like, they better address all this in the next movie.
Yeah, like address it, but it's like at least mention like, oh yeah, we lost a lot of people. That should be acknowledged, because it would be acknowledged. I think they're so traumatized from it that they were like, and ever since then, they've been trying to avoid having large fights in populated areas. I mean, they did it with BVS. They were like, no, let's not have it in the city. Let's bring it over to this island over here that no one is in. And they've kind of been trying to avoid that collateral damage for the backlash. So it seems like an overcompensation, and just visually it didn't look appealing.
Yeah, I mean, I get the trauma, but at the same time, when you look at it to differentiate, like, and this is what WB should look at, to differentiate the hero from the villain, not only in those scenarios, especially now that Superman, going back to Cavill and being the first, he would be established. Now he has to deal with saving everyone while still worrying about defeating him, which highlights how good these heroes actually are. They're not just worried about defeating everyone, they're worried about saving everyone, which would be a better wrinkle. It would bring layers to these characters rather than just trying to straight out avoid it, because the villain obviously isn't going to play along with their plans.
Yeah, which we had in Man of Steel. We had moments where Henry Cavill Superman was saving people while fighting off Zod and his Coonies. You know, and I think in this movie, despite the desert land, Sasha Kaye, who plays Supergirl, she had her moments where she did kind of save some humans. But it's true, the brown background is just like, oh, okay. This is like a comic book artist taking some shortcuts where it's just like, I'm not gonna draw a cityscape. I'm just gonna draw some zigzag lines, and then that's it.
Yeah, it felt lazy. Like I said, I can understand possibly why they did it, but it understanding doesn't mean it's a good choice
Yeah.
overall. So hopefully that's the end of that, and in the future we start getting some battles where there is those stakes of, hey, we gotta be there's civilians here, so there's a lot at risk here, not just desert sands all around. Uh, with that, I think we could transition to, because I feel this next one is one that we all have. So I'm gonna assume that we all have it,
Okay.
and we'll start with you on this, George. The visual and effects choices made for this movie.
Oh yeah. Well, you had put something of like worst scene. It's like anytime the VFX was put into place, that's the every worst scene, honestly. The obvious thing is the speed bowl or whatever the hell he called it when he's in the speed force. All
The
right, that's
bubble thing,
the
yeah.
bubble. Yeah, that's obvious bad CG. But the ones that actually glared out to me was the tiny things when Ezra is talking to Ezra, and they're both like in their Flash costumes. They're both CG. It went back and forth between the both of them being CG. It's like, you had the actor. Why are we not just using the actor? It just boggled my mind. Like the times when they chose to use it were not the most adequate moments. It would have been cheaper just to have the person there, as opposed to having the poor CG artist work on another render. It didn't make any sense to me. Like, I can forgive the speed bowl because it's like, maybe this is Barry's mind. This is how he sees the speed force and all these things. All right, artistic approach. I could be kind of forgiving, but you have people. Why are we not using the people? I just couldn't understand that. It was just so stupid to me. And it was
Like,
noticeable. It kind of took me out of it.
yeah, like there's a reason that studios hire stand-ins for like test shoots and all that. You can have an actor just see the back of their head look similar to Ezra Miller
Yeah.
talking to Ezra Miller, and then you just change the camera angle. Now you have that stand-in on the other side, back of the head, talking to Ezra Miller. You had to do some extra cuts. Okay, cool, whatever. That's significantly less expensive than CGIing everything.
Yeah, and especially, you're not doing a Batman movie, which is going to be mostly at night. You're doing a daytime movie. So a lot of these things, they're going to be more glaring because it's more
Yeah.
lit up. So it's going to be more noticeable when you're doing a daytime setting. And I did notice some of those things. I did notice it with Ben Affleck's Batman at the beginning when he was on the motorcycle. Sometimes the CG was a little off on his face. And that's because, there were certain times frames they didn't have Ben Affleck to film, so they had to get a double, and they CG'd like Ben Affleck's
Yeah.
face onto it.
Mm.
So moments like that, it was noticeable. As a whole, because I know the Speed Force effects, the baby effects at the beginning were
Yeah.
some of the worst that they had in there. From what I've been reading, I feel like we can't put that on the visual effects artist. This seems like a lot of this was artistic choice, the wrong choice, but artistic choice. For the Speed Force, they wanted it to be his perspective. He sees everything waxed out and without the textures and stuff because that's how they see it. Not my favorite approach. And then with the babies, I kind of get that. They didn't want the backlash of a bunch of real looking babies falling out of a building and what people are going to say about that. So they were like, let's go with cartoonish babies. In that case, do something else. Don't do
Yeah.
babies. Do humans falling out like adults. You still got to save them too.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be that big of a
When I saw
deal.
those babies, I was like, oh, they're doing this. This is happening. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. We've seen the multiverse or like Speed Force, like we've seen in other projects for DC, MCU, in TV, in animated, and all of that, where you have a hero or a villain in a point where they're intersecting with multiple timelines or multiple universes. We've seen that done before and done better. Even just recently in HBO's Titan series, they did something there where one of the characters was in this fixed point, this in between area where he was able to see some of the other universes. that we have there, and you saw like the CW universe, and we saw, you know, even like the DCEU universe, and that was done better. So we've seen it done better using real clips from these projects instead of going with these unexpressionless, waxed out, whatever it is that they did with that. It was a bad choice.
From what I've been reading on it, going with the creative choice, I saw a quote. They're trying to maximize on the appeal of video games. So they didn't want it to look realistic. They wanted it to look like a video game. But again, it's a choice. It's a weak choice, because like going up with our acting coach, there's no such thing as a wrong choice. There's a weak choice and there's strong choices. They made the weakest choice possible. Going into what you were saying with the light, like when we saw the Superman, spoiler alert, George Reeves looked fantastic, but that was all black and white. Nicolas Cage, really dark setting. That CGI didn't look that bad. Christopher Reeves, it looked really bad, and it was all sunlight.
Yeah, don't mean to interrupt you, just because you reminded me of something. With the Nick Cage, yes, the CGI did not look bad. They actually filmed Nick Cage, and they filmed Supergirl, and then they converted them to CGI to fit the creative choice that they made. So they didn't even have to CGI Nick Cage and Supergirl out there. So just a little tidbit out there to throw for anyone who doesn't know. That was just, they say shoot your shot, and sometimes you're going to fail. So he shot his shot with this creative choice. Hopefully going forward, he sees, okay, that was not the best choice, and we don't get something like that again. Minnie, you have any other things that the movie could have done better?
Yeah, replace Ezra Miller. Like you were saying, like even going back into Justice League, the theatrical cut, the mixing of the multiple different Flashes into somebody called Barry Allen, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Surprisingly, though, during this run, I could tolerate older Barry Allen way more than younger Barry Allen.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what they were going for with writing and the dialogue, but growth-wise, if they kept older Barry Allen, if Ezra Miller does continue doing it, if they keep him as he was towards the end of the movie, then that's fine. That seems more in line with the type of personality Barry Allen has. But again, out of everything that we've seen Ezra Miller in as the Flash, that was 40 minutes of him being, at most, of him being an actual representation of Barry Allen.
Yeah.
It's not good.
I mean, there's a reason why I put on my name here, Impulse Nicolopoulos. That's who we watched. Like, for me to go into this movie, I don't see Barry Allen. I see Bart Allen, the Impulse.
And I agree with that. How older Barry was reacting to younger Barry is how I have been reacting to Ezra Miller's Flash from the start. Like, God, you're annoying. Like, settle down. One of the other things, I don't know if you guys will agree with this, is I felt the inconsistency with the powers with the Flash, though that kind of bugged me. There was two main things. First of all, the bullet hole when he got shot in the silo, and the fact that it was taking so long for him to heal, and he was getting carried out of the silo. He should have healed faster. You know, it's been shown in the comics that his healing abilities is even faster than Wolverine's. He should have healed.
It was shown in the movie.
Yeah, with the burns, they like, okay. But no, not a bullet hole. It must be like an anti-heal bullet that like went through his leg.
Those Russians, they have very strong bullets.
Yeah. These are made specifically for Flashes who we didn't know existed. There was that, and then they introduced the aspect here of moving organics, like living beings, and the effects that can do, which is why he couldn't just grab the babies and move them. And when he grabbed Barry Allen, he threw up. And that was just like a few feet, which, whatever, if you're going to introduce that, I guess scientifically it would make sense. Body's not used to moving at that speed. But in this world, you showed us something different. I remember in the Justice League, he was moving people with no effect, including, I think, Victor Stone's dad. He saved him by moving him out. So this hasn't been shown before. To introduce it at this point, it didn't fit well.
I totally agree. With that bullet shot scene, I was thinking that the whole time. It's like, why isn't he healing yet? Why is he still limping? Why is he being carried right now? What is happening? What?
The moving people thing, I can kind of justify it, because when you look at the previous versions of the Flash, he's been doing it for a while, so he kind of knows how to handle people when he's moving super fast. There was that, like, it was a very throwaway line when he was getting shot and right before older Barry Allen threw up. This is what you did. I had to spin you out of the way. So he moved his head. He wasn't secure. He spun him really fast. Like, again, it was a very throwaway line. Like, not many people are going to catch it, but it was kind of explained offhandedly. You're not moving them the correct way. So that's why they're having the effects.
Okay, but my rebuttal to that is at the beginning of the movie, that's an even more experienced Flash than what we've seen. And he was not even trying to move the babies because of this reason. And that's an experienced Barry.
It's an experienced Barry, but it's also...
He didn't even move the nurse, who's an adult.
I'll give you that one.
Yeah.
The babies I was going to be able to explain, like, they're not fully formed. They still don't have bones. Like, it's harder for them. Like, I was going to explain that. But the nurse, yeah, that's the inconsistency.
Yeah, I had a thing with that scene where I just felt like Barry with no powers should have died with how inexperienced new Barry was with like him moving him. To be moved that fast, it's like he should have broke his neck.
Yeah,
it would have been beyond throwing up. He would have been like, oh.
I didn't get why he just rush over and grab everyone's guns. He like avoids the first bullet and he sees more bullets come. Why not just go and just like swipe everyone's guns? And
he's not smart yet. Like, he's not there. So like I'm forgiving towards new Barry not being able to do anything, because it's like he don't know. Does anything.
He not play video games? Where's your instincts? I have one more bad, but I want to give you a chance, George. Do you have another bad in your chamber?
I mean, I got a lot of bads in my chamber. The inclusion of Supergirl and the casting for Supergirl. I didn't mind her. I will state this. Okay. All right. There was no bad actors in this movie, as far as I'm concerned. I think everyone did their best with the script that they were given. I gotta say that. All right. With the script that they had, everyone did their job. So I didn't think she was bad at all. I thought she was fine. My disappointment, and Dan's not with us, so I know Dan's always a champion for like another Latinos on there. Yeah, we're represented. I didn't feel represented here. All right. How I felt was like, all right, we got one of our own in here. Oh, but she's being killed off over and over and over again. It's just like, we're never going to see her again. It's like, I don't need representation to be thrown away. It's like, I didn't feel like she served any purpose towards the story, with what we were given. I would have been much happier if it was just a regular Supergirl and then we never saw her again. I'm okay with that. But to have representation, to never have it ever again, I'm like, why'd you do this to me? Like, what? You pushed her so hard in the beginning when they were doing like the filming for this, and it's like, look what we did for you guys. We're doing good. And it's like, what did she do though? She didn't do. She just gets her butt whooped over and over again. Like, she has some moments of temper tantrums. Okay, was this a showcase for us?
She's kind of giving Zod the work to start. She's giving Zod some work.
Like, she fights. I'm not saying like she gets her, like, she doesn't get owned, but she does die every freaking time. Yeah. And it's just like, come on, man. Why? Like, this is what we're ridiculed to every time. If we do get representation, we end up being the bad guy, even though we should be the good guy, and we end up getting killed off. It's like, it's a short-lived run. It's like, I'm kind of done with that. Like, give me Cisco from the show Flash. That was representation. He's
I thought of the Ron Cisco when you said that.
No thongs. No vibe from the Flash TV show. Like, he's Puerto Rican, he's smart, he's goofy, everyone likes him, he has struggles with his family and his powers and all this other stuff, but like, he's likable and he's there to help out. Like, he serves a purpose. I haven't got that from any of these films where they try to give us something, so that was a little nitpick for me. And I know it's not a big deal for other people, but when you're going to use that a part of the marketing, then it has to mean something. That's my gripe.
Not going into the representation aspect of it, but there's a term for this character that I can't think of right now, where it's a female character whose sole purpose is to die to give motivation to the hero.
The girl in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
That's basically what she ended up being. Like, she's built up to be this like really badass, like she's Supergirl, like she's going through, but then she dies, and that's the motivation for a younger Barry to turn into a villain. Like, she ended up being that woman in the refrigerator. Yep. It took longer in the film to get there, but that's what she ended up being.
Which for my wife, that pissed her off. because she looked at it from a female angle. She's just like, all right, so we're just a device. We're not really here to help. We're just here to be cannon fodder. Okay, thanks.
And then I agree. I like the snippets that we got from Sasha. In this, I saw the potential there, but it did
There
feel
was.
like it felt like a tease. Like, I was at Costco and they were like, "Hey, you want to try this brand new like Chipotle chicken like sausage?" And I was like, "Ooh, that's good. Where can I get it?" And they're like, "We're sold out. You get no more of this." And
It's
that's
got
pretty much what
discontinued. It
yeah.
got
So so it just felt like a tease. So I am holding out hope. I know overall, even the people who have enjoyed the movie and the people who hate the movie, there at least seems to be a consensus that they like her as Supergirl. So hopefully that carries on enough momentum that she does get used. I wouldn't mind seeing her in The Woman of Tomorrow. With that being said, I do have one more. It's a story issue, and it's the fact that after we went through this entire movie and everything, in the end, Barry learned no lesson at all and came off as a hypocrite. The whole point of this was him learning to let go. There's some problems that you can't solve. Sometimes you got to let things be. Whatever other cliche statement you want to throw out there. And it looks like he learned that lesson and he accepted it. He's even trying to propel that message onto younger Barry, who became obsessed. But then at the end, he still changes the damn tomato can. So he still made a shift. He's like, okay, fine, I'll let my mom die, but I'm gonna save my dad. So you still did exactly the same thing again. So you learned no lesson in this at all. So I think that's a story point where it's like you build all this up towards one thing, and then at the end, you kind of pulled it away with that action. So that was one of my big ones. That probably dropped it the most over the visuals or everything because that's a key story element for me.
Like, I get why they did it, because going into the whole, like, it's not a fixed point in time. Like, you can make this small change and still keep the timeline intact. However, as we found out after the court scene, that small change still had massive repercussions. Not as drastic as trying to change a fixed point in time, but it still had repercussions. But yeah, it completely defeated the purpose of the story, the lesson learned. It was used more as, in my opinion, just a way to get rid of most of the Zack Snyder actors and bring in James Gunn's actors for the upcoming universe. But yeah, it made the entire movie pointless.
But you could have easily done all that without taking back the lesson learned. It's been done before. It was even done in the Flash TV show better in that aspect. The best way to explain it is like looking at the timeline like a vase. You smash a vase, it's in multiple pieces. Even if you go back and you put every single piece back exactly to where it was, so the vase kind of looks similar, those cracks will never go away. So there's still always going to be slight changes in the future, even if you fix it. So even if he didn't move the tomato cans and everything, the future would have still been changed because there's those cracks in the future. And that's, I know in the Flash TV show, it caused minor changes where someone's daughter became a son now. So light changes, but it still caused changes in the future. So they could have easily had him learn this lesson and still had those changes where now the Batman is different and this is different. And you still would have gotten that ha ha like moment at the end.
Yeah, I mean, just
Oh
again,
no, I
always refer to the comic books. Flashpoint in the comic books, he learns his lesson. We get the new 52. It's all a brand new world with things we're familiar with, but there's slight changes. And only the Flash knows what he did. So it's so you're saying, to Jose's point, it's like it could still be, things can be changed without him losing his lesson.
Oh no, I completely get that. My justification of it is, I guess they were also very, I mean, they had an entire scene talking about Back to the Future. Is you look at that storyline, like Marty McFly learns his lesson at the same time, but he forgets to go back and change one thing, which altered the path that his family was on. So his dad's now a famous writer. They're not living in a tenuous family. Whereas the difference here is Barry Allen made the choice to make that change. It still altered everything in a different way. He's the only one that remembered his past life, but there's where that inspiration was deferred, if that makes sense. Marty McFly forgot. Barry Allen made the choice.
Accident versus conscious decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which maybe that's what they should have done, gone with accident. Because that could change the whole thing. If in the scene Barry takes that tomato can and doesn't put it back with the other tomato cans, maybe he puts it on the top shelf by accident.
Because he's still looking back at his mom and
Yeah.
emotional.
And maybe that changes everything. That little move changed just enough where like his dad, and then he could be surprised when he gets back, like, oh, my dad's free, like something happened. And that's a way better thing. How much better do we feel for him being surprised that his dad's being released, as opposed to him knowing that he made a decision to make his dad get free?
No, I agree. That would have been way better. Happy accident.
Yeah.
Better than, oh, I didn't learn not to mess with the past. I just learned that way did not work, and let me try a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's a set thing. Maybe this isn't canon. Maybe this is the thing that's okay.
Yeah. Because him doing that makes him no different than the younger version, who just kept trying a new way until he, became evil. At the end, became obsessive over it. That's technically the same thing. One way didn't go. Let's try a different way. Is he gonna go back again when he finds out the next day that something's completely like messed up? I don't know. Maybe his mom still survived in this new timeline, but she became a criminal. She became the Joker.
She's the Joker.
All right, so I feel we've gone hard at this movie for a while. Let's touch on some of the good aspects of it.
And there is good stuff. There is good stuff. But
there is. You want to start off on this one, George?
I think the obvious thing that goes almost without saying is Batman. This is Batman's movie. And not just Michael Keaton Batman. Both Batman, exactly. I think I still see the Flash as part of the Snyderverse, despite him not being a part of the production on this. It's using his characters, it's using things that were based within the storylines he already started. I think that the Snyderverse has given us the best representation visually on Batman. It was so great to see Michael Keaton come back, and it's like he never left, honestly. And Ben Affleck he's a freaking great Batman. I don't know why we're not getting a Batman film from him. It's an injustice, pun intended. All right. But like it was great to see like Michael Keaton's Batman get to do physical things that he didn't get to do in his run, because of whether we didn't have the technology yet, or just like maybe the physical aspects weren't there, whether it's like pulling the strings or whatever. It was just great for him to be allowed to be a part of what is capable nowadays with that character. It was beautiful. He stole the show as far as I'm concerned.
I like Flash, but I'm a bigger Batman fan.
Yeah.
And so that's probably that, went into my score when it came to scoring this, is because my favorite character got done pretty well. But yeah, both of them, we got it, again, it was a tease, it was a snippet with Ben Affleck at the beginning, but it was good to see that Batman in action, because to this point, Ben Affleck had been the best action Batman that we've gotten ever, throughout all the movies, action wise. So it was good to see that again. I wish it would have been nighttime, but that's another point in there. And then Michael Keaton, like you said, seeing him in action. So it was the same Batman, but different. We got to see so much more from him. And even still using like the old gadgets, because he's been retired for a while. I'm sure he's not upgrading his gadgets during retirement.
Yeah.
At this point. So even that, even like had a flip phone, like BlackBerry looking phone during one of the scenes. So it was good, seeing that, and I'm glad that was extended. The whole silo scene was great, except for the bullet in the Flash leg, but everything else was great regarding that. Even though, George, we talked about this when we were doing one of the upcoming episodes. I was a little about Brave and the Bold, mainly because what Brave and the Bold has represented in the past is your cheesier, light-hearted Batman, and that's not what I prefer. But seeing how he handled both Batman, two different Batmans in this, gives me a little hope for Andy being at the helm for Brave and the Bold going forward, that he's going to be able to handle the character well, handle it with respect, and also give us a good action Batman overall. So that was one of the good things that I took out of that.
Yeah, because there's good comedy moments with Batman. Like he works off of the two Flashes very well, which is no surprise. It's Keaton. The guy knows comedic timing out of his butthole.
And that's the way it should be. I mean, we know from the animated series that Batman can be funny as the straight man reacting off of the people around him. So it doesn't mean it has to be all doom and gloom, but Batman should not be up there laughing, cracking jokes, and things like that. His comedy should come from reaction to other people. What are your thoughts on the Batman, Millie?
Oh, I loved it. I thought, I mean, seeing Keaton in the suit again was fantastic, and I think for the younger audience, growing up with Christian Bale and now Robert Pattinson, Ben Affleck, not really seeing the Tim Burton Batmans, I think now they're going to want to go back and watch it, which is great because I was reading an article the other day talking about why Keaton is considered one of the best Batman in live action, and it's because if you watch the first one, whenever he's Bruce Wayne, he's always distracted. He never knows what he's doing because he is fully 100% Batman. That's why his Bruce Wayne isn't that great, because he doesn't know how to be Bruce Wayne, similar to what we saw with Pattinson in The Batman recently. He doesn't know how to be Bruce Wayne yet. But yeah, the Batman scenes were great. Jeremy Irons coming back as Alfred was awesome. I would love to see more Jeremy Irons as Alfred in this upcoming canon universe that Gunn's putting together. Supergirl was great. Loved seeing Supergirl. But yeah, I mean, the weakest part, honestly, for me was just Ezra Miller, which sucks because it was an Ezra Miller driven movie. Everything other than Ezra Miller was fantastic.
I would like to point out, I was hyped in the theater where there was Keaton versus the Kryptonian, and just seeing him battle there and sticking them with the bombs and just being elusive. Yeah, I was like, that's Batman. That is Batman right there. You know, and yeah, he went down at the end, but he's like, I don't care about your superpowers. Like, I'm going to do whatever I can to take you down. That had me so hyped because it made it believable that he had a chance against this person, because he wasn't just straight up coming up and fist fighting this person. He was using his intelligence, his gadgets, his, elusiveness, and that made it believable in the moment. Like, okay, I can see why Batman's on the battlefield and holding his own. So that was great. I hear you, Minnie, on the Ezra part. I didn't mind older Barry as much as I did Barry in the past within this DCEU. I did like the contrast that they had between the older and the younger Barry, in the way older Barry was kind of speaking for the audience in a lot of parts. So I did connect with that overall. It could have been executed better, but the undertone of younger Barry's turn at the end, the fact that, unlike the older Barry, this is a Barry who's had a great life, has not known loss. So he got his powers without knowing loss. And then he experiences big loss for the first time, and he can't handle it at all.
Yeah.
He kind of loses mind, becomes obsessed. On the story aspect, on how that was written, I did like that. The overall execution and how it went down could have been better, but the undertone of that part of Barry Allen and the difference between how the younger one reacted to those losses at the end and the older one was a great contrast. So I think that was done well.
Yeah, the story wasn't the biggest problem. It was it was a lot of the execution. And I mentioned earlier in this episode, I didn't mind older Barry Allen. When he started actually being Barry Allen, because he had this younger, immature version of himself that he needed to reel in, I really enjoyed that Ezra Miller. I mean, I still didn't like Ezra Miller as the Flash, but that was a better version in that movie compared to anything else we've seen him do as this character. But yeah, I mean, story-wise, there wasn't a whole lot of issues with it. Like I said, it was just that really small thing at the end that completely disrupts the message that was supposed to have been learned. But story-wise, it was an enjoyable story. I would definitely watch the movie again. I had a lot of fun with it. The comic moments were fantastic. Keaton was great as always. The cameos at the end were fantastic. I really liked those. I liked how they brought all these characters back in some way, shape, or form. Although, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't hear Kevin Conroy anywhere. Did you guys?
There was a lot of TV things they didn't incorporate though.
Yeah, I heard Adam West.
Yeah, because they showed him. They showed the Adam West Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't see Kevin Conroy.
Yeah,
anywhere,
it felt like they
Kevin
stopped
Conroy
at the 80s. for anything that was DC related. I don't think they really
Okay.
hit upon anything 90s and up.
Yeah, because that would have been great, especially with him passing recently, like having
Yeah.
some sort of Kevin Conroy or
The
even
best Batman.
the Batman for like 2 decades,
Yeah.
like in video games, TV shows, animated movies, like
And live action.
and
He
live
was
action
he was Bruce
in the
Wayne
Crisis
in
on
the
Infinite. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it would have been fantastic to pay some sort of nod to him.
I would say even more than 2 decades. He started in the 90s.
Yeah.
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 When
Yeah,
was the last Arkham game to come out?
Well, not only the Arkham game, I think he also worked. It's still being shopped around. No one's gotten it, but he also did work on a new animated
Yeah, they were bringing it
Batman
back.
series.
Yeah.
They're bringing it back, and that's not completely dead. They're just trying to sell it because they don't want it on HBO Max. So we might still get more Conroy, in the future.
Hey, real quick, I'm curious, since you brought up the Barrys and the turn at the end, were you surprised at the big villain at the end, or did you know ahead of time that it was going to be the Flash still? Because I've known for over a year that it was going to be the Barry the whole time.
I wasn't surprised at
me-
the villain
Oh.
coming out because I think I saw images of a toy or something that got released
Yes.
or a collectible.
Yes.
So I knew that. I assumed it was going to be Barry, but I didn't know for sure that it was going to be Barry.
Yeah, I mean, I've been out of the movie game for a while. Like this is the first movie I've seen in theaters since Jurassic World Dominion.
Oh damn.
Oh
So-
boy. Oh boy.
Yeah. So I haven't been keeping up as much. So I didn't know it was Barry. I didn't know who the villain was. I didn't see any of the screenshots of the toys. But after seeing him pop up the first time, knowing the character, knowing the history, even seeing that version on the Flash TV show, like you knew who it was. Like if you know the characters, you knew who it was.
Yeah.
For me, that was disappointing, I had to say, because and this is because we've talked about like The Village recently in our personal chats of how the promotions for it kind of ruined it for people. It was promoted wrong. I feel like this has been happening with comic book movies where the promotions through toys and action figures are ruining the film before it comes out. So I saw almost every toy that was coming out for this movie about a year ago. And when I saw all the figures, I was and they showed like all the multiple flashes. I was like, it's gonna be Barry. Like I can tell by these figures and how they're designed. He's the guy. Like they're not gonna have Professor Zoom or Reverse Flash. It's just gonna be Barry through all of it. Different versions of him messing up the timeline. And that was disappointing. Like I don't want the action figures to ruin the movie on me. You know.
And I think that's a higher risk also when you have a extended production time frame from when the movie's announced to when it releases, and we got that with the Flash. How many delays that we have with it, how many things we go through, that even runs at a higher risk because the longer the window is, the higher chance of something leaking out or information getting out overall. So yeah, no, I agree with that. So like as soon as he popped up the first time he goes through the stream, I kind of had an inkling of what it was going to be because of that. That I saw in glancing. Going back into like one of the things that I do like the emotional aspects that they portrayed with the family, especially with the mom. It made it really believable that their relationship was so good and there was so much love there that he was willing to go to this extent. I've seen movies before, they try to sell me on the relationship between family members, but I don't see it on screen. I don't feel it. I felt it here between him and his mom. So it made the stakes believable and his actions believable that he would go that far. So I think that is one aspect that was done, very well. I feel this one, it blended the emotional aspects in the action and most of the comedy naturally with it, where it wasn't really sticking out. We've seen, especially with a lot of recent MCU movies and some of the DCU movies, where sometimes the comedy just feels very forced. Whereas like we have to put in comedy, we have to make them laugh, and it just doesn't work. It's jarring because it feels unnatural within the scene. And I feel a lot of the comedy in this one didn't feel unnatural. It kind of felt like it flowed with the scene itself. And then the emotional aspect, they seemed earned.
The best thing about it is that when you're in a deep, heavy moment where there's either sadness, anger, they let us live in that moment with him for that bit. as opposed to, let's say, Thor: Love and Thunder. Oh, this person has cancer. Let's laugh at it. You know, it's like, in this, like, no, he's feeling this. We want you to feel it right now too. We'll laugh later. It's gonna come, but right now you got to be sad. You know, and I really felt that too. It's so true. Like, all the emotions were hit very hard. Which, also, side note, how great was the casting for that little kid?
For real,
I was like, that's Ezra Miller as a child. That's
did they de-age them that bad? That's
Yeah.
where the technology has gone now. They can
best child casting ever.
The entire budget went to de-aging Ezra Miller for that scene.
I do got a question for you guys, just because I know this is something that's been brought up on social media since the movie came out. What are you guys' thoughts on the post-credit scene that we got at the end of it? As we know, this is the third version of what it was. I don't know if you want to get into it, George, of what the 3 endings were going to be.
At the end, we get George Clooney as Batman. This was shot, I guess, 2 weeks before initially putting the final cut together to send out to the theaters. So this was a last minute thought that James Gunn and Peter Safran, from that, they saw the other 2 cuts, which initially had like Wonder Woman and the original Batman and stuff being there,
and Cavill.
And Cavill. Well, I think Cavill was there for the second ending.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were because they were gonna kind of play with that idea of like keeping these characters going forward, but with each test and then with the passing of the torch between Time Warner was going back and forth with all of these mergers and going with Discovery. And which we've covered on past episodes of NASS, so definitely check those out if you want to learn more about what's been happening with Warner Brothers. But there's been just so much going on that every time there was a new shift, there was a new ending being added to this movie, because they're like, well, now this isn't going to work. We got something different. And so now we're on this third ending where like Gunn's just like, well, we're not keeping any of this stuff anymore. Let's do something different. And they kind of joked about, like, why don't we have George Clooney be Batman again? And they're like, well, why don't we do that? And they called him up, and he's like, that sounds great. Gives him like this 2-second sense of like redemption almost for the bad Batman that he had to be. And so the movie ends, we see George Clooney is Batman, and then at the post credit we get a drunk Aquaman, and he's learning what's happened over the flashpoint that we just watched. I think that kind of sums up everything. There's lots of fixes there needs to be. My biggest question is, it's like, if this movie is now the reset point for James Gunn's new DC universe, does that mean that George Clooney is now the Batman of this world? Is he now the official Batman?
I don't think this movie is the reset that everyone was making it out to be. I think it's more of a closure of what we had of the DCU and kind of closing it out, which is why we ended with a Batman who's not gonna be our Batman. Yeah. I think that was like the main sign of like, no, this is more of just kind of, this was already in production. This has already been made. A lot of money has been put into this. You know, it's testing well. Let's still put it out there, but this is just kind of a closure of what we had. And I think that was the seal point, was having Clooney in there and not putting Ben Affleck, which then might get people thinking something, or putting Keaton, which might get people thinking something. Exactly. I get why James Gunn went in there and it was like, okay, we need to like cut these like cameos out, because if he's not going to use this going forward, I can just you've seen how the Snyder Cult is. I can just imagine if they would have kept them at the end, the hashtags, the polls, social media is going to blow up like, they're bringing them back, they're doing it, blah, blah, blah. And we would have never heard the end of it again. So why even let it get to that point? Just don't include them at the end to show like, hey, we're moving on. They could have just eliminated the post-credit scene. I get why they threw it in there and they included Aquaman, because his movie is still left. Even though this is the closure, they flip-flop which movie was supposed to go first multiple times. They've like switched their release dates. I think that was just more like, hey, this is still left. Don't forget about Aquaman. But I think this is not a reset and then at the end we start the new one. I think this is just a close as a whole to that world. And I do think now, after watching The Flash, more than ever, that we really are going to start fresh.
Well, I actually saw an interview recently with James Gunn with the Michael Rosenbaum show Inside of You, where he actually stated, he's like, Blue Beetle will be the first movie of the new, regime pretty much, but Superman will be the initial like story starting point
Mhm.
of what's to come.
I did see that. I keep forgetting about Blue Beetle because the marketing for it is shit right now.
Yeah.
And I'm barely seeing after that first trailer and people got a little hyped. I've not really been seeing much on it. With that being said, Minnie, what would you have done to
Yeah,
alter
what's
the
the
ending?
fix?
So keep everything the same. Drunk Aquaman, Barry Allen pulling him out of a bar, trying to get him someplace so he could sober up. The fix would be changing the dialogue. As Aquaman is just absolutely shit-faced and Barry's leading him around, you have some people walking by, and Aquaman drunkenly tells Barry Allen that he fucked a fish. And that's how the rumor from Peacemaker starts, that Aquaman fucked a fish. And that would have been fantastic.
Connected to Peacemaker.
You just have Diebeard walk by.
Yeah. Because then at the end of Peacemaker, they're going through, it's like, why does everyone keep on telling me that I fucked a fish? And Barry Allen looks at him and is like, well, it's true. Right? Like that would have been a great fix. It doesn't tie into anything that we just saw. It ties into a James Gunn DC project, and then like that's the send off. I mean, there was enough jokes in there already, right?
That is true.
Yeah.
What's everyone's standout character in this? I know it's not going to be Ezra for many.
Nope. The mom.
Oh,
The mom
okay. That's
was
a good choice.
She did an like that relationship that they built, the way that she delivered everything, even at the end when she's like talking to Barry, not knowing obviously that she's like he's her kid. Like the emotional gravity that she brought to it was fantastic. The mom was by far the standout character of the entire movie.
I can see that, and I think especially with her being Hispanic, I felt nurtured during it when she's like talking to him and she starts the little music and dancing. I'm like, am I home? Like, what's what about for you, George?
I'm gonna let you have the guy because I know who you're gonna say. I feel pretty confident who you're gonna say. So
I don't think you know what I'm gonna say.
no, you're not gonna say the guy.
I felt you were gonna say the guy.
Oh,
So I wasn't gonna say the guy.
All right, then if that's the case, then I'll take him. All right. Michael Keaton, man. Michael Keaton doesn't lose a beat. We're in an age where people are coming back to roles that they've played decades before, and some people are really big hits. You know, like Tom Cruise coming back as Maverick, and then some people we get like Bill and Ted. Music should be turned off. You know, they're not bad, but it's just like you've been away for this for too long. With him, it's like nah. I felt like he's still been Batman. Like just like how he says in every interview when he's on a late night show, he is Batman. No matter what, he's always gonna be Batman. So I felt like he was even though at first I felt like he was cast and put in there just to save the film. He did it. He did his job. He did save the film.
George is probably gonna pick Keaton, so I did have a backup, and it was Sasha Calle. Like I
And
know we
that's
talked
who my
about.
backup was gonna be.
I know we talked about how she didn't get a lot. It felt like a tease, but I call it a standout because with the little bit that we got, I wanted more. I got out of the theater. I'm like, I want her in Woman of Tomorrow. Like I want her to be the Supergirl, and I feel that qualifies as a standout if you're making me want to see more of you. Let's get into our final rating and any final thoughts that you may have. Let's start out with you on this one, Millie.
All right. Final rating, I gave it about a 6. Again, it was enjoyable. The biggest problems that I had with it were with Ezra Miller, which is unfortunate because like the movie was built around him. I would definitely rewatch it again. I don't quite put it as a background movie status where I'm going to have that movie going and doing something else. If it's on, I'm going to watch it, but I'm not going to be the person to go out and say, hey, let's go watch The Flash. I'm at about a 6 with that.
George?
I don't know, maybe because we were talking about it and like I'm starting to like relive some of the good stuff. I had 2 ratings, and one was like moviegoer, this was an 8. As a comic book lover, this was a 5. But I think I'm probably somewhere now between like the 6 and 7, just because it's like I do want to see the scenes again. I want to watch the Batman scenes again. I didn't hate all of the Flash running around, so I kind of want to watch a little bit of that, over again. You guys have changed my heart a little bit.
I wish I went back in time to feed you more information.
Remember the good
Didn't
stuff.
learn his lesson.
Remember the good stuff.
I'm about a 7 through the first watch through. We'll see how that changes with future watch throughs. Overall, it was very enjoyable. While it might not be, for me personally, the best DCU movie, it was one of the most entertaining DCU movies that there was. It had a lot of flaws like we talked about, but for me, the things that it did well overshadowed a lot of those flaws to the point where it was good. It was a 7. I will watch again, and who knows, it might go up, it might go down. We will see. Thank you everyone for joining us for this bonus episode where we reviewed The Flash. You can find us on all social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, find these videos on YouTube or wherever else podcasts are found, such as Spotify, Apple. Did I miss any, George? I usually don't do these outros.
No, you're doing good, man. You got this.
Perfect.
We'll just go back in time if we need to fix it.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That being said, I have been your host for this episode. I did not think of a clever name, but you can find me at This Is Mi Nombre on Instagram.
And today I am not your host, but I am Impulse. You can find me at Nicolopoulos, wherever I am found.
And I'm That Guy 2022, and I'm only on Instagram.